What's the issue?
Oh, well, good
Oh,
morning.
I think I know what the issue is. We have a little issue here. Just a minute.
Good morning. From IBMTV, International Broadcast Media, this is the World Edition. From Washington, D.C. to New Delhi, India, from the oldest democracy to the largest democracy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bill Tresvant. Today is Thursday, November 19, 2020. There are 61 days left in the Trump administration. Leading the World Edition today, Prime Minister Modi of India said it is time for tech solutions that are designed in India but deployed for the world, and the country is uniquely positioned to leap ahead in the information era. Addressing the Bengaluru Tech Summit, Modi said India is at a sweet spot and it is time for tech solutions to be designed in India but deployed for the world, stating that his government's policies are always aimed at liberalizing the tech and innovation industry. Modi pointed to the government's easing of the compliance burden on the IT industry. Next, this weekend's summit of leaders from the group of G20, held online this year because of COVID, the gathering of leaders of the world's preeminent rich and developing nations will be without red carpet arrivals. It is not expected to yield a globally unified response to the pandemic. While billions of dollars have been pledged for medicines and vaccines, G20 countries have mostly focused on securing their own supplies. The G20, whose member countries represent about 85% of the world's economic output and 3/4 of the international trade, was founded in 1999 as a way for finance ministers and central bank governors to discuss the global economy. China's President Xi Jinping spurned suggestions that his country might separate itself from the U.S. and other trading partners amid tensions with Washington and Europe over technology and security. Xi promised to open China's market wider, but announced no initiatives to respond to complaints the ruling Communist Party improperly subsidizes and shields technology and other industries from foreign competitors. The ruling Communist Party has promoted its own standards for mobile phones and other technology, which would encourage customers that adopt them to use Chinese suppliers. That has prompted fears in the world markets that world markets might split into smaller segments with incompatible industry standards, hurting productivity. Next, China has strongly rebuked the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada after being accused of a concerted effort to silence critics in Hong Kong. The countries which formed the, quote, Five Eyes Alliance criticized China's imposition of new rules to disqualify elected legislators in Hong Kong. They urged Beijing to reverse course. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson warned countries to stay out of China's affairs, saying, quote, they should be careful or their eyes will be plucked out, end quote. The Chinese never make trouble and are never afraid of anything, Zhao Lijian told journalists in Beijing on Thursday, saying it did not matter if they had 5 or 10 eyes. Elsewhere, the United Kingdom will stop selling new diesel and gasoline-powered cars and vans in 2030. The move is part of a wider 10-point plan for a so-called green industrial revolution aimed at generating as much as 250,000 jobs and combating climate change. The vehicle ban represents an acceleration of prior targets. UK authorities had previously said the sale of new gas and diesel vans and cars would end in 2040. Around the globe, Japan reported a record number of daily COVID infections amid a spike in a country that has been spared the worst of the pandemic and hopes to host the Olympics next year. Compared to many other countries, Japan has done well, reporting just under 2,000 deaths in a nation of 126 million. But Tokyo saw a record number of single day cases twice this week, and the national number hit a record with 2,179 new cases in one day. That's the first time Japan has had more than 2,000 daily cases. Africa has also surpassed 2 million confirmed cases. The African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the 54-nation continent had crossed the milestone. Africa has seen more than 48,000 deaths from COVID-19. The African continent of 1.3 billion is being warned against, quote, prevention fatigue as countries loosen pandemic restrictions to ease their economies, suffering and more people travel. While the world takes hope from promising vaccines, African health officials worry the continent will suffer as richer countries buy up supplies. In a historical note, 75 years ago today, the dock of courtroom 600 of the Nuremberg Palace of Justice was packed with some of the most nefarious figures of the 20th century. Hermann Goering, Rudolf Hess, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and 18 other high-ranking Nazis. They weren't yet known as war criminals. It was a charge that didn't exist until the Nuremberg trials began on November 20th, 1945, in what is now seen as the birthplace of a new era of international law. The proceedings broke new ground in holding government leaders individually responsible for their aggression and slaughter of millions of innocents. In addition to establishing the offense of war crimes, it also produced the charges of crimes against peace, waging a war of aggression, and crimes against humanity, whose legacies live on in the International Criminal Court today. Hurricane Iota left destruction and killed at least 26 people in Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala, and Colombia. About 99% of the properties on the Nicaraguan Caribbean coast are without electricity, and residents are wading through the wreckage of 2 storms in as many weeks. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season has been historically active, with 30 named storms so far, the most ever. In the U.S., Trump's scattershot efforts to overturn Biden's victory is shifting toward obscure election boards that certify the vote as Trump and his allies seek to upend the electoral process, sow chaos, and perpetuate unsubstantiated doubts about the count. The battle is centered in the battleground states that sealed Biden's win. In Michigan, 2 Republican election officials in the state's largest county, which is inclusive of Detroit, initially refused to certify results, despite no evidence of fraud, then backtracked, and then voted to certify, and then flipped again and said that they, quote, remain opposed to certification. In Arizona, officials are balking at signing off on vote tallies in a rural county. And yet Biden's winning tally is approaching a record 80 million votes. His total continues to rise as Democratic strongholds like California and New York process their remaining ballots. Biden will likely have won the White House by a greater margin than any other president this century other than Barack Obama in 2008. Biden is also on track to win the Electoral College with the same 306 votes that Trump described as a landslide victory in his own 2016 race against Hillary Clinton. Separately, a handful of current Trump administration officials are quietly reaching out to President-elect Joe Biden's transition team. The move is a sign that Trump's refusal to concede the election is beginning to frustrate even those affiliated with him. The General Services Administration is yet to acknowledge his loss and begin the formal transition. As a result, Biden and his team have no access to federal agencies, funding to help with hiring for the new administration, and access to classified intelligence briefings. The conversations are not as detailed as formal briefings would be under the officially sanctioned transition, but they are giving the Biden team a sense of what their priority issues will be after taking office. And now, the COVID report. In less than 10 months, COVID has killed more than 250,000 people in the United States. That's more than strokes, suicides, and car crashes typically do in a full year combined. Medical staffs are overwhelmed with record hospitalizations. Governors are rushing to issue restrictions on gatherings, and deaths are averaging the highest in months. Infections are mounting in major cities, a major setback after a spring spent battling the ravaging virus nationwide. The Texas border city of El Paso is paying inmates $2 an hour to help the medical examiner's office move bodies of COVID victims. New York City school system, the largest in the country with over 1 million students, is closing and transitioning students to remote learning again. The U.S. logged over 170,000 confirmed cases in a single day for the second straight time. Health experts are warning that if Americans don't get more serious about wearing masks and avoiding careless socializing, the rate of deaths will increase. Finally, the COVID death toll from Johns Hopkins is over 250,548 American souls lost in the last 8 months, a staggering 31,000 per month, and 1,352,188 global souls lost, or an unimaginable 123,000 people per month worldwide. That is your World Edition for Thursday, November 19th, 2020. I am Bill Trezevant.
Oh, your fan club has arrived, Bill.
I don't know why. I mean, all I do is
They deserted Adam from last night. I think that's what happened. They're moving over here today. So, and speaking of fan club, we have a guest who's arrived who's been on our show many times and has his own show. Let's welcome from Canada, Sasha Starr. Sasha, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah, the news hour with Bill President. Let's see, he used up 10 minutes, so I guess it's the news 50 minutes. And I was on his show yesterday, investing with Sasha. It was pretty good, by the way. I went ahead and bought both those stocks. I bought Altria. I bought Altria and I bought Walgreens this morning. But I invest a little different than you. I'm not looking for short swings and narrow-minded covered calls. I'm looking for something to park it. Funds for, and then
with dividends like that.
I like the dividend.
You're absolutely right.
Well, I'm looking forward to your review next week because I'm basically putting in, I'm shifting funds over into the market for the first time in about a year because the market through Trump was just, I couldn't handle it. It was too unstable. And I believe going forward, at least it'll be stable. I might be wrong, but the thing is, I think COVID will be behind us and we're going to go into a stable market. I might be totally wrong as opposed to the instability that we've seen. But here's the other problem, Sasha. I can't leave the funds in cash. You can't make any money in cash. I mean, it's impossible today. So you're almost like forced to go in the market where your money's going to sit and be eaten up with inflation. And when you show me dividends at 4 to 8%, what am I supposed to do? Say no? And they're decent stocks anyway? How do you say no?
They're not very exciting stocks. I don't expect them to double in next 35 days, but they're very stable. They're paying very good dividends. And by the way, you can also sell some covered calls against this position from time to time if you choose to. Right. So you're in a good situation.
Oh, yeah. I figured that I'm not looking to make the home runs and the strikeouts in the tech sector, at least at this point in time. Maybe over a period of time I'll actually go back and revisit it. But right now I don't know. I go, well. Remember Zoom skyrocketed, but now it crashed. I mean, the thing is, if you bought it at 500, now you're sitting at 380. You just lost a lot of money, and I don't know when you're going to get it back.
Yeah, it's a little bit more. It's a 414.
But so it went back up again. Well, I mean, you have to enjoy that volatility, and so the thing is, and to do that,
you really got to have a lot of tolerance for this stocks. I must tell you.
Yeah, I don't have any tolerance. Yeah, Bill.
Oh, yeah, no, I just want to ask both of you because the leading issues today, at least on the World Edition, were the three things. India's announcement that they've arrived and that their tech industry is going to be built in India but exported to the world, which is quite a visionary kind of thing.
Sure.
So the Do Nothing G20 conference, and then the competing Chinese conference, in which, most importantly, China announced that they would not in the future decouple their economy from the United States economy, even in the face of continuing tariffs and lousy trade wars. What do you guys think?
Well, the thing is, remember, Biden is actually more of, even though he may have the rhetoric, China, he's doing it really to match Trump. But the fact is, Biden, it was the choice of the Chinese, and Trump was the choice of the Russians. So basically, Biden won. I mean, China won, and I think you're going to see the relationship improve. But in the meantime, China is not going to ignore the fact they have to move their future forward with or without the United States, which is one reason they signed that regional compact. India was out of the compact, but India might be moving more closer to the United States because as a trading partner, if we're looking for a lot of labor, your choices are China and India right now.
Right.
And the thing is, the U.S. can go to either one of them. My preference toward India was mainly, Bill, is they speak English.
Right.
I don't know how good your Mandarin is, but mine's really horrible. Maybe Sasha speaks Mandarin. I don't know.
Mandarin?
I forgot.
You forgot it.
Yeah, when I was young, I could speak Mandarin, but I forgot all that.
Yeah, I forgot all the Mandarin, right. So the thing is, it makes it easier to get around if you speak the language than if you have to go there and you don't.
Well, because what's interesting about that, Nick, is that China, or Xi Jinping's comments and remarks during the conference that they're leading at the same time as the G20 indicated that they are now, that they have announced or stated as their policy that they see India as their next main competitor. And Modi announcing that India was here and that they were going to be exporting to the world. So, I mean, are we seeing the potential for a new trade war, either Nick or Sasha? between India and China? I mean, 1 billion versus 1 billion. That's got to be, the biggest democracy and the most efficient government, Nick, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. You have the world's largest democracy with the world's most efficient organization. China being the most efficient, India's is a big democracy, but they're going to have a formidable competitor in world trade with China, which is very efficient. In other words, they get her done, as they say down south.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think the Americans lean more toward India, which is one reason IBM has more employees in India than they do in the United States. So we lean more toward working because we have this weird myth that democracy is great. And so because as long as we drink that Kool-Aid, we're going to be working with India.
So early in the morning, Nick. Sasha, okay, we're going to skip over that last piece.
I'll be back.
Yeah. What do you think between China and India and the newfound apparent emerging battle between the two?
Well, this battle is emerging, but right now it's nothing but just emerging. And if there will be ever battle, it will be probably not earlier than 50 years from now, because India is so backward compared to China in absolutely all categories. It is. I'm surprised that people really take it seriously.
Some would argue that India's economy is one in the early stages of recovering currently, and recent forecasts have indicated that India's economy is set to begin to grow again at about 8% a clip. But aren't they? But they're more nimble than the Chinese run economy, because the Chinese run economy still works on 5, 10-year, 20-year, or 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and even a 50-year economic plan. So
the problem is that India, and you can say probably for Indian people just as well, they lack imperial aspiration of China and Chinese people, and that is decisive. Remember when I spoke many times on the show that the passion is the most important component of the world civilizations, and China has much more passion than Indian people. No, Indian people are passionate, but not about economy, not about the world leadership aspirations, nothing of that. They're very religious people, they're very ethical people, but got nothing to do with aspiration for a world leadership position.
Sasha, isn't that partly due currently to their current Prime Minister Modi, who has been avowedly nationalistic? And so it would just be perhaps a change in the leadership for somebody to be, for the next Prime Minister or future Prime Minister, to be more concerned about global affairs for a change in India's positions in foreign policy. But right now it's Modi, and he is more nationalistic and introverted, wouldn't you say?
Well, okay, Modi is their leader now, but it's nothing to do with to compare him with the Chinese leader Xi, who not only very skillful, I wouldn't I wouldn't rate him as a great leader, but skillful for sure, and his skills relies in his ability to unite all the people in Chinese government to work together as a team. I don't see the same thing from Modi. I don't see him as a brilliant leader whatsoever, and I don't see any abilities of him to organize and unite a strong government that could bring India up.
Isn't one of the key differences, though, that between Modi and Xi Jinping is that Xi Jinping had the Chinese constitution amended so that he can now serve as president for life, which was the first time that it was allowed since Mao Zedong. So there's a bit of a power discrepancy because Xi Jinping is now in for the rest of his natural-born life. He essentially gave himself a lifetime appointment. Isn't that a bit of a difference? Whereas Modi could still be voted out of office.
Well, it reminds me our loser in the White House, who also wanted to have his position for life, and it didn't work out for whatever reasons. And
Yeah, I was trying to avoid Trump for at least the first 20 minutes. Okay, well, okay. So, yeah, we've got him in the White House. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe it's a combination of those two, but then let me ask you this, just because I want to get your sense before we then get into the rough details. And that is that simultaneously, we have the summit of the G20 leaders. And now normally that would be big news. It would control, it would dictate, the world agenda. All eyes would be focused on the economy. But this year, even though it's going on at the exact same time, you hardly hear of the G20 summit that's going on in Saudi Arabia right now. And does that represent, even though the G20 combined produce, make up 85% of the global economic activity in the world and the majority of the international trade, does it signal that perhaps they're just not as relevant anymore as these new shifts in economic partnerships are being developed right before our eyes, Sasha?
don't you think that it's going to be rather a G19 meeting, not 20, because our loser is not going to attend most likely, right? So,
well, we don't know because actually it is virtual, but you're right. It may be just a G19 because reports.
I don't think that even he will decide to participate. I don't think that 19 countries attending there would like to have anything to do with the loser. So most likely it will be G19 at this point.
Well, is Russia going to come to that? Sometimes they don't get invited.
No, Russia is not.
Russia's not invited?
I don't think so. But look,
why? No,
why not? Why wouldn't they invite Russia to the G19? Aren't they G19?
Russia is one of the countries who is inviting others to G19. Same as China, same as Brazil, same as South Africa, all the BRIC countries, and so on. They're all part of G20.
Okay, well,
it used to be G20, now G19.
Okay, fine. Then the G20 asterisk, which would be the G19, isn't it losing influence because nobody seems to care about what they may or may not do? Well,
nobody cares about whether loser will be there or not, but the meeting will go on anyway.
Well, they're not really expecting anything significant out of the G20 summit this year, partly because the U.S. is in transition, partly because the other G20 countries have just been, separated over the response to the COVID crisis and the vaccines and things of that nature. What prospects are we looking at, or perhaps you, Sasha, or you, Nick, looking at economically in the, say, next 12 to 18 months with regard to the economies? Do you think the G20 can get our international cooperation back in order, or are we just going to see this kind of malaise for a bit? Nick?
No, yeah, I think they're going to see more cooperation take place because you got rid of your leader over there, Bill, who loves to create issues, but he's going to be gone. And then you got your full-time politician you just installed, who for 47 years has been giving away the American economy overseas. And so he wants to go back on track to continue to give away the American economy overseas. And so he's going to go back with his buddies overseas. So he can
for another 47 years?
Yeah, for another 7 or 8 years. We're not sure. And then the thing is, as we discussed later on in the program, everybody knows nursing homes are going to explode in the United States because Joe will need places to stay as he travels. And so that's probably what we're going to see in the next year, a big increase in nursing homes and obviously more U.S. giveaways, which will take place.
We have to start looking for stocks in a nursing home industry, I think.
Okay.
Nursing home industry stocks will skyrocket.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I don't think that they're going to. Well, actually, you never know because I mean, with the continued reticence of the Trump administration to provide any of the transition briefings to allow Biden to get a head start on the pandemic planning, it could very well be true that we just lose our most vulnerable population. That is to say, those over the age of 65. And so we would need nursing homes at that point. So
yeah, that's true. True. Sasha, let's look at some funeral homes stocks. Because that could actually have a spike in the next couple months. As the United States people continue to ignore it. And some of the nurses are going, these people are weird. They're on vents and saying, as they're dying, their last breath is, I think COVID-19's a fraud. And then they die.
Okay. That is true. And that is actually
that's true. Right. But that's how. Okay, so we need to look for funeral home stocks, Sasha.
Okay. Now that you guys are done, I don't
especially those operating in Republican states.
I'm going to. It's a fraud. It's not true.
In times of war, they would call you guys war profiteers, but I don't know what you call them in times of death.
Is there a way we can profit off of that too, Sasha? Let's look at that also.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, how about we try this? How about we turn our eyes to what China's response to the Five Eyes are alleging? That is to say that they are protesting concertedly. And the Five Eyes, many people may not know, consist of the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada as kind of a coordinated coalition. And they've criticized China's imposition of new rules, given all the turmoil and anti-democratic fervor going on in Hong Kong. Now, Nick, before, I think in an earlier show, your position was, well, let Hong Kong just get over it.
Yeah,
now, okay, but apparently China's position is that these Five Eyes should be careful or their eyes will be plucked out. Now, how mature a response is that from China? Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that's their problem dealing with the eyes. The thing is, China does have to realize that one their takeover of Hong Kong, which was legitimate, as you well know, and all the people in Hong Kong had notice and opportunity to be heard that they were going to be taken over by China. So now they're part of China. So they have to deal with it. And see, the real problem is they have the same problem they have in the United States. Too much freedom. They believe in this thing called freedom, and okay, freedom doesn't really exist, and so the thing is they're protesting, but they just have to get over it. They are part of China now. If they want their freedom, there are plenty of other islands they can go to, and some of them did. Bill, they hopped on planes, went to Vancouver, British Columbia. They went to other countries. There's other countries they can go to. So
no. In fairness for the ones that stayed looking for their freedom, they thought that they were promised their freedom, as you would say, with the agreement on their being their semi-autonomous nature being guaranteed. What the Five Eyes, or I should say, the leading Western democracies are saying, with the absence, of course, of India, they're saying that, hey, listen, Hong Kong, you're reneging on the self-autonomy deal.
All right.
And that's a legitimate point, don't you think?
No. The thing is that they're their overlords, and they just have to get over it. Okay, and the overlords have the right to change the rules. They make the rules, and they changed it. Too bad.
Nick, then how do you even run a market economy based on a lack of rules and the rules changing every time?
I believe you're talking about communist. Wait, sir, are you talking about communist China running a market economy?
No, I was actually referring to what you call the most efficient form.
It is efficient. They got tired of listening to the Chinese people complain that the jurisdiction of the complaints were going to be held in Beijing, not in Hong Kong. So what they did is they put the iron fist of the dragon into the people of Hong Kong. What do you expect?
Now, Nick, a dragon doesn't have a fist, but I mean, it's okay. I mean,
okay, the iron paw of the dragon on Hong Kong. Now, if they want to, they can leave. Look, nothing's stopping. They can leave, or they're going to have to accept the iron fist. Instead, they go out like a bunch of roaches and start protesting in the streets of Hong Kong.
Okay, well, and Sasha, I'm going to come to you, but I just Nick keeps baiting me, and that's this. Nick, I mean, if that's the case, and you're saying that that's okay, and you're advocating that the rest of the world should cast a blind eye to the iron claw, rather than the iron paw, because you've gotten it wrong twice, Nick. What does that say for bordering countries like India and Nepal and all the other places that have those regional conflicts that we talked about?
Look at Crimea and Russia. Russia took Crimea, and rightfully so. And the reason why is most of it was ethnically Russian. They were causing a lot of trouble, and the what do they call it? The bear Putin. decide to quash it. So they took it
May
out.
I?
Yeah,
just
you probably know a little bit about Crimea, right?
Sasha,
when Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, and it was on the watch of George Bush elder. And by the way, the Yeltsin called first to him, to George Bush, rather than Gorbachev, because they needed U.S. on its side. Okay, so now Russia became independent country, Ukraine and many others. Now, interestingly enough, Ukraine was left with very substantial nuclear arsenal. So now we had nuclear countries there: Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and perhaps Belarus, although I'm not sure about that one. But I think they had some, at least maybe tactical nuclear arms, because Belarus was the most Western country of all of those. Okay. Kazakhstan for sure had strategic weapons. But Ukraine had so much weapons of mass destruction, it would equal to Russia, because Ukraine was also more Western than countries in Russia itself. So at the time of Soviet Union, it didn't matter where the nuclear arms were stored, whether Ukraine, Russia, or Uzbekistan, whatever. So now U.S. had a task to concentrate all these nuclear arms in one country, not in 4 or 5. So obvious choice was Russia. And so there were treaties that all these countries like Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and others, if there were others indeed, they would have to move all their nuclear arms to Russia. However, in exchange for doing that, United States and UK guaranteed their territories because without nuclear arms, and Russia being the only sole possessor of those arms, they could not fight with Russia in case of territorial conflict would arise. That treaty has name a Budapest Treaty of 1994.
okay.
Well enough, 20 years later, Russia invaded and took Crimea away from Ukraine. With referendum or no referendum, that's a secondary story. But UK and US neglected on their guarantees that this no territory would be lost by Ukraine in this particular situation as a result of its inability to defend themselves against nuclear power. So in this situation, so what business, what moral authority U.S. headed by a loser in the White House have to do anything with China, Hong Kong, or Poland, or Antarctica, or Arctica, or just any other part of the world? I'm very curious.
Sasha, you took me on.
By the way, that's a great point, Sasha. But remember, that was written in 1994, and I think we had a Democrat in the office, another giveaway Democrat, and so. What happened was that now we're talking about, that was decades ago, and some of these contracts, they need to be re-upped, or else they basically become old and cold. Frankly, I didn't even know they had that type of a contract.
Really?
Okay, that's good news.
The idea of this contract originated from Bush.
Right. Okay. Or Bush. Okay. So another Republican giveaway.
No, Nick, you're about to pounce, and let me just have you take a deep breath and get ready to pounce, because I'm about to do something and simply compliment Sasha, because Sasha, that has to have been one of the best walks through the woods, because you told me a story. I didn't know where it was going to end, and then you landed the punchline, and it was devastating. Go ahead, Nick, because Sasha.
The thing is, I think Ukraine entered a horrible deal if they did that, removing their nuclear weapons and trusting the United States and UK. That was stupid. They should have kept their nuclear weapons and say, we're going to rely on you guys to come defend us. We know that ain't happening, and they should have held on their bloody nuclear weapons, because they know that, well, you might defend us today, but 20 years from now, you ain't going to be there when we need you. That's the realities of international treaties. And so the thing is, anybody who enters in it, and that's Ukraine, their leadership made a horrible deal. as Trump would say. That's a horrible deal for them. And so yeah, they marched into they marched in Crimea, which I think was theirs anyway, and the U.S. keeps pouting about it. Too bad. We don't belong over there anyway.
No, Nick.
That's Russian territory.
No, we've already imposed economic sanctions, so much so that
economic sanctions don't work. You've seen studies on it. Okay, economic sanctions is BS because basically all you do is you hurt the people of the country. You do not zero in on the politicians. It is a horrible thing. It's like, remember when you're a kid in class, Joe acts up. And by the way, because Joe acts up, everybody in the class is going to get punished because of Joe's actions. That is so totally BS. It's a bad policy. It's bad by Europe. It's bad by the United States.
Nick,
horrible. These sanctions should all be withdrawn.
It's a bad, Nick. It's a bad all on your own policy, but in a combination with other tools of pressure, it absolutely works. I mean, it's one of just the pieces, or one of the weapons in your box. So
no, it's a horrible weapon. It's bad. It's bad ethically. It's bad morally. It's bad socially. And the thing is, these governments in the West need to just get over their stupid economic sanctions.
Absolutely not, Nick. Historically,
you're punishing the people of Russia that do not really have a choice for what their leaders do.
No, it's not necessarily so. I want to give you one very, very interesting example.
Okay, give us an example.
Sasha spanked me, so Nick, it's your turn. Sasha spanked Nick.
Okay. In fact, the sanctions which were imposed by West against Russia after Crimea, I wouldn't say affair. Okay, it's Crimean affair. So what's happened is that the sanctions were very clever. In fact, they were directed very particularly against certain Russian oligarchs, that from now on they couldn't visit European countries, they couldn't travel. So there were a lot of restrictions that have nothing to do with Russian people who can't travel anyway and wouldn't even try. Okay. So I remember interview, it was back in 1914 or maybe 1915, 2015, with one Russian oligarch who had a palace in Antibes, France. He had his yacht, and he had probably 20 people who were serving him there, and he was coming there for a few days every 3-4 months or so. And all of a sudden, he couldn't go there anyway. Anymore, and he was giving interviews saying, you know what, okay, I'm doing fine, but I miss so much the moment when my plane arrives to Cannes and I'm taken by Rolls-Royce to my little place in Antibes. And there, all the restaurants around, they know what I love to eat. So they're bringing their food as soon as they know it's already around. And I miss that. I hate my life now.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
It's exactly that kind of targeted punishment that actually helps out. And let me remind you, with economic sanctions that brought South Africa's apartheid program to its knees. It took a little longer, but it's a safer alternative than war. Now, and not to confuse you guys, I just have to, there was just a brief announcement. It happened about 5 minutes ago, and it's certainly relevant to our discussions here today. The Brexit talks have just been suspended over in the UK. And that's because the EU negotiator, the lead negotiator, has just been diagnosed with COVID. And now here we are. We are, 5 weeks away from a no-deal Brexit if they can't get stuff together. And the lead EU negotiator just walked out of talks. What do you guys make of that?
I don't understand something.
What?
Boris Johnson already had coronavirus, so he has immunity. So why he can't continue to have the talks? What's the problem?
Okay, all right. Well, the EU negotiator apparently didn't, but I mean that's just economic uncertainty. Now, I'll just throw that out there and give you guys a chance to kind of consider the implications of that. But more importantly, though, economic sanctions clearly work, and they're working in Iran with the government's inability to get economic relief, and they're dying for economic relief. They're pleading around the world to lift some of the sanctions because the economic sanctions are having an impact. More importantly, in North Korea, economic sanctions have been having an effect, and stopping from North Korea from time to time from completely losing it and dropping missiles all around the world. So, Nick, how can you say economic sanctions are toothless when what they have done is they've brought about change without the loss of our blood and treasure?
Well, the targeted sanctions that Sasha says works. The blanket sanctions that hurt the people of the country are wrong, no matter how you look at it. So
Nick, there is one sanction
I
that
don't
Russia
mind hurting.
fears.
I don't mind hurting the oligarchs that can't get their country club memberships that are making the decisions. But you have to target it.
But I want to tell you something. There is one sanction that Russia fears more than anything else. This is disconnecting Russian banking system from SWIFT. So therefore, their all international deals are thing of the past, because without SWIFT you cannot transfer money. You're like nowhere. You have to bring your all marbles physically. Get $5 million. Okay, it's over there and it's over here. With Operation Cash only.
Wow.
Yeah, that could be it. But target it if you target. But what I disagree with is that you starve people in other countries based on the fact that you disagree with what they say. That I disagree with.
Listen. I mean, you're assigning a moral obligation or moral value judgment to what is essentially economic policy. Tariffs are a form of economic sanctions, and so you can't say that. Well, a country cannot impose economic sanctions just because some people will go without food, because the two are not causally connected. It's just that, listen, if we refuse to sell engine parts to Cuba, so be it. That's not going to stop people from eating, Nick, and you can't make that connection.
The thing is, it's interesting to hear you throw out moral obligations that leaders like Americans have. You've obviously spent way too much time in Washington, and maybe you've spent way too much time with Donald Trump. Okay, but the thing is, we do have moral obligations to these people. It's part of what make America great again. But why you would say we don't have moral obligations to the people of these countries is just abrogating our position as leaders of the world.
No, Nick, I'm going to refine that for you. We don't have a moral obligation to suffer economically. I mean, we have free reign in our economic policy, and we're a capitalistic country, and that's based on competition. And so our economic foreign policy should not be designed to or take into account supporting other nations' economies when those other nations are doing things that harm the greater good. In fact, I would argue that we have a moral responsibility not to help them out economically, which is where the moral underpinnings for an economic sanctions would arise from, Nick.
Yeah, but you have to separate the people from the government. In other words, some of these people, let's say in Iran, they do not have or even maybe even support their governmental leaders who are a little bit off. And you think it's okay to punish them based on what moral obligation? You say we have no obligation.
No, I mean that's not delusional. That's just kind of misguided at this stage.
I didn't say you were delusional.
No, I stopped short of calling you delusional. I'm calling you just slightly misguided.
I'm objective and I'm correct, but you can keep going.
Oh no, that's fine, because I just can't believe that you're making that kind of argument on the anniversary date of the Nuremberg trials, which you had a government, and I guess in this case you would separate the Nazi German government from the people that they govern, when in fact the people in Nazi Germany fully supported the Nazi government, and they were one and the same. But you would say, your argument would say, that we should not have established any kind of economic sanctions against Germany in response to their slaughtering of 6 million Jews plus about another 8 million other nationalities, because it would hurt the poor, lowly Germans who were completely without fault while they were occupying the Panzer divisions, rolling destruction and death all across Europe. That's insane, Nick.
No. If you read history, you'll just discover you're completely historically incorrect, Professor Trezevant. Okay, the thing is, what caused World War II was the sanctions from World War I. And if you recall, there was a Marshall Plan by the United States of America that benefited the German people after World War II. You would have gone in and punished those people right after World War II. And if you did so, you may have gone to World War III, because the economic sanctions, the Marshall Plan was there to help the people of Germany, and that's what we did.
Yes,
It was correct.
no, we all agree, but you're shrouding yourself in after the fact goody two shoeness rather than talking about it at the time that the conflict was most important. And that is to say that at the time Hitler was in power, that the rest of the world came up with economic sanctions targeted towards Germany because of their abuses worldwide and the naked aggression. And you're saying that that shouldn't have been done because the poor people of Germany would have been hurt, even though they were being governed by the Nazis. And in order to prove your point, you're then, and get this, you're then waiting until after the war and saying, oh, well, we helped them then. Well, what? So we should have helped them while they were the ones voting in and following and supporting and arming and killing all across Europe? No, that's the precise time for the economic sanctions, just as it was a precise time for the economic sanctions against South Africa when they were actively participating in apartheid. Now, after that, those things have been fixed, then we can come in and we have a moral obligation to help them, but not during. We have no moral obligation to economically prop up another nation that is doing harm across the globe.
Yeah, but the thing is, your Western ideology was one that made Hitler born because of your quote sanction after the Treaty of Versailles that punished with huge reparations the German people, putting them into poverty and squalor, and that was the birth of Hitler because he could easily rally around because of your economic sanctions, the West economic sanctions. They could easily rally around Hitler because they didn't have a choice because of your crazy sanctions on all the people of Germany. So the West basically created Hitler, and they got what they deserved. They got Hitler because the people followed. Of course, they followed him, Bill. You guys were starving them because of your quote economic sanctions, which you so desperately love. So what comes out of it? Hitler. What do you expect?
I think you just stop short of telling the whole story. The whole story is that the country most guilty of Second World War was United States of America, who entered the First World War at the very last moment when the war was dying. Nobody could fight anymore. All armies, all countries were exhausted to such a degree that they couldn't even to progress just at 2 meters a day. It was becoming an impossible task. So if they were left alone, they would sign for a peace with no reparations, no contributions, and they would try to rebuild their countries, their economies. They were all in exactly the same shape. Now enters United States. All of a sudden there is a clear loser, there is a clear winner, there is a idiotic, absolutely a peace treaty with a humongous reparations and contributions and so on from a country that didn't have any means even to feed their own people. So this was atrocity which absolutely 100% led to a Second World War. However, United States learned something from that. And after the Second World War ended, United States did 2 great things. Marshall Plan is number 1. By the way, Russia was invited to join Marshall Plan. And of course, Joseph Stalin, who was busy getting his nuclear bomb, he refused because he says, why do we need that? We are going to have our nuclear bomb any day now. Number 2, what they've learned, and they did brilliantly executed, Nuremberg's process. Because English people and lawyers who represented them, they were not interested that much in the process itself. They wanted just get it in a couple of days to kill all these criminals or hang them, and maybe even to use guillotine. I think French prosecutors could insist that those guilty of invasion of France could be tried and killed that way. However, America's position was very different. United States wanted to prove that the crime wars were unacceptable and have to be punished the harshest way, but all these crimes have to be laid down so people would understand what they are, so it will never happen in the future. And English prosecutors had to go along with U.S., and that's exactly. Actually, of course, all we know is that there were several trials. It wasn't just one Nuremberg trial; it was a main trial. Interestingly enough, each starting from Goering and everybody else has its own trial of himself, and they had their own mitigators and defenses and so on and on.
Okay. Well, listen, gentlemen, I have patiently listened, and and I have to say this: I am convinced that both of you are right. That perhaps, to the extent that you're making the argument that it was the economic sanctions that created Hitler, it proves my point. Economic sanctions work, and that's why we continue to use them. So, Nick, you lose on this one because your very example of the economic sanctions producing Hitler just means that economic sanctions are in fact effective, and that we ought to use them as the United States as part and parcel of our arsenal of democracy, which is what we often call it. And that's a combination of our foreign policy, diplomatically, our economic policy, propped up by our military strength. And I see absolutely no problems with it. And I disagree with you that we have a moral obligation to help those people in the very nation by helping the governments of the very nations that oppress them. Under your theory, we should get rid of all economic sanctions on North Korea and help Rocket Man continue to oppress his people and put in slave camps and everything else. Nick, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In your opinion, they do work, but they produce the wrong result. In other words, of course they work, but in your opinion, you go, well, if a bunch of people starve in these countries, I'm okay with it. If all the Germans starve and you make them so desperate that they'll bring a guy like Hitler into office, you're okay with it. And so I am saying that we should take the moral high ground. I notice in Washington, D.C. that's a hard thing to do because your leadership and the whole thinking of the Potomac River is not to take a moral high ground and take whatever position they can that makes them feel good at the time. And what makes them feel good at the time is to exercise and flex their power muscles by imposing economic sanctions on people and punishing people that have no say in it whatsoever.
Look, Nick, the second problem with your argument is at its inception, and that is to say that only the economic sanctions could have produced Hitler. And that is to say somebody that the world just generally has agreed upon was just kind of, not worth it. Now, here in the United States, we were not suffering from dramatic economic problems, and we elected Donald Trump as president, which the world has similarly said is generally not necessarily the best choice in the world, just as some would say or characterize Hitler. But that didn't come about as a result of crippling economic sanctions. And so you can't say for sure that Hitler wouldn't have arisen even without economic sanctions and or the circumstances that existed prior to World War II. And
it was a major contributing factor. And anytime you think your moral ground is to starve people in other countries, then that's morally incorrect.
No.
How you look at it.
No, that's how you're
to get to the leadership. Now, I don't mind Sasha, where you do targeted sanctions against certain individuals. Yeah, that's okay. But why do you insist on imposing punishment on poor peasant landowners or peasants, saying the peasants are going to uprise and take over the leadership? It just ain't going to happen.
No. I mean, that's the underpinning for some people's theory for economic sanctions. They think that. I think that's a bit of a pipe dream because all it does is it produces more repressive governmental.
Okay, so we're in agreement then.
Well, no, on that point. But I mean, your argument is illusory only because you're suggesting that that the economic sanctions are just going to go take away some stones from Geppetto or some wood, his carving knife, so that he can't make puppets anymore. And that's clearly ridiculous. No, the economic sanctions are saying that we are not going to do international trade with your nation, with your government, because your government is doing all these other bad things. Now, what's going to eventually happen is that if we did do business with those kinds of oppressive regimes, all they would do is they would take all the money anyway. And then they would just continue to perpetuate themselves. And so we have a moral obligation not to give them any form of life, economic or otherwise. And you just want to focus in on the peasant, like poor Geppetto. And it's not about
poor Geppetto, right?
It's about what the leaders are doing, killing people, engaging in mass destruction. And that's why here on the anniversary of Nuremberg, we now have International War Criminal Court. That's why we have these things such as crimes against peace, crimes against humanity, and the crime of waging an aggressive war. That's why we have all this stuff, Nick. And the easiest way to do it without fighting another world war is through economic sanctions. I can't believe you would even disagree with that.
Of course, yeah, because the thing is, the way they're done, if they're done systematically throughout the entire country of the people that live there, and you affect the people who live there, it's morally and ethically incorrect to do it that way. If you target, like what Sasha's saying, the individuals that actually cause the problem, I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem punishing the entire class for the misbehavior of one or two individuals and not targeting those one or two individuals. So yes, I'm totally in disagreement with the economic sanctions that the West makes it feel good. And even the Nuremberg trials, what a joke. That was just to make us feel good out West. There were a lot of war criminals that took place. And how do we define a war crime? War is a crime. But the only problem is with the Nuremberg trials, we happen to be the winners. Because we were the winners, as was pointed out by your friendly lawyer that shows up on, how you say it, the lawyer's den, that the winners get to make the rules, and they made the rules, and the rules became the Nuremberg trials that punished only certain individuals. And they created this whole concept of war crimes, ignoring all the war crimes that actually took place by the United States of America. We totally ignore those because, remember, we're the winners. We ignore the war crime when we depose by using our CIA and overthrow governments of Iran. Wait, that's the thing that caused Iran to begin with. And we ignore that. When did we take the CIA and convict them of war crimes, Mr. Trezevant? We didn't, because we're the winners. So the reason why Iran has a lot of angst against us deals with us overthrowing their government several times. And what do you think? Did the CIA ever get tried for war crimes? No, they didn't. Why not? Because we're the winners. We don't get tried for war crimes. Only the losers do.
Nick, to co-opt one of your phrases, listen, so what? Get over it. That was the past. We're moving to a brighter future now. And so what? Do you want me to cry over spilt milk that happened decades ago?
Well,
that was like 70 years ago.
Wait. Which was 70 years ago? The Nuremberg trials or the overthrow of the Shah of Iran? Which was 70 years ago?
No. Actually, you got it wrong, but I'm going to help you out anyway. It's the installation of the Shah of Iran, because it was the overthrow of Mossadegh in 1955.
And who overthrew him?
Well, the people, the Shah of Iran.
Which people?
The Iranian people. They Shah of Iran.
And who was behind it?
Yeah, well, fine.
Can you say CIA, or is that impossible?
I'm saying it now, but I'm actually.
Was that the U.S. CIA or is the Russian CIA?
But it was Republican president anyway who did that.
So it's okay. It's not okay.
What is, Nick? That was over 70 years ago. That was 1955. That was Mossadegh, who was elected president, and he was about to nationalize the oil fields. The CIA, and then they installed the Shah of Iran. That was 70 years ago. And
Nuremberg was even further years ago, my friend, and you keep bringing up Nuremberg. If you're going to bring up Nuremberg, I'm going to bring up the overthrow of the Shah of Iran so that you can take over their oil field. Thank you. And you never put the CIA through a Nuremberg trial, did you?
No. But listen, look, I only brought that up just to remind you that in fact are war crimes and that we established that because we are the victors and we set a principle and a model. So we are actually we have the moral high ground. But listen, on this historical tit for tat, I feel like we're in the sandbox because yesterday you brought up Vietnam. Like, seriously, debating with you is like stepping into the Wayback Machine. And then all of a sudden, I'm stuck 70 years ago. I mean, only eclipsed by Sasha's sage advice and wisdom coming from 150 years ago. I really don't know what century I'm living in. The 1800s, the 1900s, or the 21st century. Seriously, fellas. But that's okay.
Have your calculator close by, so you will calculate.
Yeah, you want to celebrate. You put it on your news, the war crimes of Hitler, and you never put on the news the war crimes of the United States. And I don't know why, because they're in Paramatera, but you, for some reason, take the high ground, say, oh, there's some war crimes by the United States. You should just be honest, Bill. Say, but we're the victors, so we can get away with it.
You know what I'll say? Fine, with 1 minute to go, because, I mean, you always do this. You sucker punch me at the end of the program, and it's well played. I'm telling you, it's well played, Grandmaster.
What am I supposed to say? It's because you see CIA isn't on trial right now.
Why don't you finish with a nice love story?
Okay.
Between Rocket Man and a loser. And you know what? I can tell you that in next year, maybe year and a half, when Broadway will open up, there will be a play, Rocketman and a Loser, a love story.
Okay. Well, what I can promise you, Nick, is I'm going to go back and I'm going to scrub my reports and I'm going to see if I can make some changes. Because, you know, Nick, here at IBM TV, because we broadcast worldwide, we are not afraid of one criticism. We're to change. And with that, you have to change our program because we have the rest of IBM TV coming up today. So
Podcaster Thursday coming on. So we thank you for listening to our show. And hopefully we'll be able to see you tomorrow. More on the Nuremberg trials later, even though it's over with 80 years ago.